Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Before I get into this, I have to apologize. I've done something unforgivable. I'm sorry for being so stupid. How could I think that New York would lose to Guangzhou? I mean, how did that thought cross my mind? How could I think that New York would move from North America to South Korea, not be super prepared, not come out, and completely just dominate Guangzhou? I mean, how dumb could I be? How dumb? How dumb could I be to not think that? And anyway, I want to apologize to the New York Excelsior, to myself, to my fans. I've let you down. I've disappointed you. And I promise I won't let it happen again. Anyway, hello everybody. Let's jump into this video. This past weekend, week 12 of the Overwatch League 2020 season. A lot of good matches. Well, a lot of matches. We're going to jump into this week taking a look at my picks from last week and how I did. So let's pull it up right here, right now. Boom! 9-1, baby. 9-1 in picks. New York, man. I'm sorry. 2-0 in the big pick games. 9-1 overall for the week. Let's just jump into it. Let's talk about this past week. We're going to start with Saturday. Now, I'm going to say right here, right now, I'm filming this video Friday night. Normally, I record these videos Friday night. Sunday night, I'm really tired. That's where I was getting. I'm recording this video Sunday night. Typically, I would record these videos Monday morning. But I, like an idiot, have been up since 3:30 a.m. because I woke up to watch the Seoul Dynasty and the Hangzhou Spark and the New York Excelsior and all of those matches that took place on Sunday morning. And I was also an idiot and did the same thing on Saturday. So I'm running on about 7 hours of sleep in the past 2 days. So let's see how it goes. Let's go to Saturday. I watched all the games Saturday. I watched them live. I watched them as they were happening. So Saturday, very one-sided day on Saturday. Dynasty 3-0 against the Spark. Pretty dominant win, though the Spark had a couple of shining moments where they looked decent overall, though very dominant for the Dynasty. The next match, Shanghai Dragons 3-0 the Guangzhou Charge. Once again, some pretty good moments from the Guangzhou Charge. I actually think they looked better as a whole against Shanghai than Hangzhou did against Seoul. Potentially. Now, there's a lot that goes into that. The Charge have played the Dragons more, so they've, the Charge have played the Dragons more times this season than the Spark have played Dynasty, so there's a bit more familiarity there. The Spark also ran like new compositions against the Dynasty, so they were trying to kind of testing things out. So there's a lot that goes into that, but the Charge looked good at times, but the Dragons were pretty dominant, and that series was a very close one. Then the New York Excelsior beat the Chengdu Hunters 3-0. That one wasn't even close. That was a complete stomp by the New York Excelsior. Very, very dominant series there. The Philadelphia Fusion against the Atlanta Reign. My big pick for Saturday. Fusion won. There were some very close moments in that series. It was a 3-0, but it was much closer than any of the ones from earlier in the day. The Fusion, like Volskaya Industries was a very good map for the Reign, but ultimately the Fusion just rolled over and really just kind of steamrolled the Reign to kind of force their way to victory. But it was a good series overall, that one. 3-0, but a pretty close 3-0. Shock against the Valiant, not very close. Shock were dominant in that one. Very, very good performance out of the Shock. Really, really impressive. After the match, Super in an interview said that he felt the top 3 teams in the league were the Shock, the Dragons, and the Philadelphia Fusion. So we will see if that's true as the season goes on. A couple things we'll talk about a little bit later that will help us figure that out. But Saturday, very, very, very straightforward set of matches. The better team, the team that everyone kind of assumed was the better team, they won in every situation. So good stuff on Saturday in terms of that. We went on to Sunday, which feels to me like the day that will never end. Sunday, Hangzhou Spark, 3-1 win over the Chengdu Hunters. They lost on control. Beyond that, it was very one-sided for the Spark. Very good defenses, very good offenses against the Hunters. The Hunters were doing weird stuff. Map 1, they rolled out with Jinmu Leave, Among, Elsa, and Mali Yveltal, but by the end, they were running A-Ting instead of Among for the last 3 maps. Same with Lengsa over Mali for the last 3 maps. And then they had Bacon Jack in for a couple of those maps, but they went back to Leave at the end, I believe. Very weird stuff from the Hunters. The Hangzhou Spark have still never lost to the Chengdu Hunters. I'm never going to pick the Chengdu Hunters against the Hangzhou Spark until they can beat them. Like, I'm just going to tell you that straight up. The Hangzhou Spark seem like the team that really understand the Chengdu Hunters. They don't have an issue with them. I mean, they've played them a lot. This is, the 5th time they've played the Chengdu Hunters? They've maybe played the Chengdu Hunters more than any other team. I don't think that's true, actually. I think other teams have played them more. But they have a pretty good read on the Chengdu Hunters, so it's a pretty interesting matchup there. But I thought the Spark looked very good against the Hunters. Once again, it's difficult to say for sure what's good and what's bad because the Hunters are a team who you don't really know what they're doing at any given moment. So that's a real tough one there to kind of analyze. The big match of the weekend, the one that everybody was excited for, the one that everybody was ready for, Shanghai Dragons versus Seoul Dynasty, was a complete and utter disaster for the Seoul Dynasty. The Shanghai Dragons completely dominant against the Seoul Dynasty. It was a 3-0. The series took less than an hour total. Not in terms of just like battles, right? Or in terms of actual game time. Because like in game time, that's not that weird, right? The entire VOD of that game, less than an hour long. Complete steamroll by the Dragons. Completely dismantled the Seoul Dynasty. What we thought of the Seoul Dynasty, throw all of that imagery of the Seoul Dynasty out the window. It's gone. It's dead. The Seoul Dynasty are gone. Now, while that's technically not fully true, let's talk about the Seoul Dynasty's performance. And I think that Reinforce had a lot of good points on Twitter, or a good point on Twitter and on the Watchpoint pre-show for Sunday, that a lot of people are going to look at the match. They're going to say that Marvel's struggles on the Diva were kind of the major issue that the Seoul Dynasty had, that they were getting abused on that Diva role, which, while I think that was probably problem number 1, right? The Shanghai Dragons basically forced Marvel onto the Diva. They played Pharah a lot, so they basically said, you have to play the Diva into us. Marvel's not a Diva player. The Diva player is Michelle, who clearly they don't have a ton of faith in if they're not playing him. But Reinforce also said, which I think was a good point to make, there was a lot of poor adaptations from the Dynasty in general. They didn't look prepared in a way. The Dragons looked incredible. Fearless, oh my lord. Fearless was clowning on the Dynasty. I saw them put Fearless in, and I was like, that's weird. I thought they'd put Stand 1 in. He's their best main tank. I don't know. After that performance from Fearless, maybe Fearless got brought up to that roster for a reason, because he is dirty. He was nasty against the Dynasty. And of course, Fleta against his old team was even nastier. I cannot stress enough how insane it was that match was that one-sided. Because everyone expected it to be a pretty close match, and it was not. I can't explain enough. Like, there are just the tiers that we thought were existing are completely shattered, right? Like, the Dragons might be on a completely like transcendent level above everybody else. They look insanely good. But I digress. Dragons looked incredible, and there's not enough I can say about how good they looked. Let's move on to my one incorrect pick. That even when I made the pick, I knew it was wrong. I knew it was wrong, but I bought into the hype. I bought into the hype for a team that I don't even think is that good in the Guangzhou Charge. I bought into the idea that the Guangzhou Charge were gonna beat New York because New York moved just like Vancouver did, and it was a dumb thing to do. But New York was dominant. New York looks incredible. Now, we haven't seen them play against a really good team since they played the Fusion back in week 3. So it's been a long time. It's been 9 weeks since then. So it's been a while. They have a test coming up this weekend. They play Shanghai. So you want to talk about being thrown into the fire. They have to play Shanghai. That will be the big test of where New York is. Right now, based on what we saw from this past weekend and all that other, just kind of in general, right? New York is the second or third best team in this Asia Pacific region. The fact that I can say second or third shows a lot about what they showed versus what the Dynasty showed. The argument was for a while that it's the Dragons and the Dynasty then the Excelsior, but maybe the Excelsior are higher than that. It's a big weekend for them coming up. Obviously, they play Shanghai, so if they win that match, I think the narrative really changes about who the best team in the league is. If it's difficult to say for sure. People may say it's Fusion at that point or New York. If Shanghai wins, I think the conversation stays around Shanghai. It'll be a good match, but I digress. That's for later on in the week. New York Excelsior, good win against the Charge. They played very well. There were a couple moments where I think you could kind of look at them and say, they played kind of scrappy on Paris, but they played scrappy on Paris after they had already gotten to round 3 and they had 5 minutes to capture 1 tick. So you're like, okay. So you can play scrappy because you just have to get basically 1 pick, maybe a 2 pick, and you turn the fight. I thought they looked great this weekend. I thought they looked clinical. I thought they looked like arguably the best team in the league. And it'll be tough for them, of course, playing Shanghai. I definitely think they're not favored against Shanghai. I think you have to give Shanghai the edge based on what we've seen from them. But New York is still doing pretty well. I mean, if you look at differential, right, which is kind of the big tell, right, and you'll get a look at it, of course, later. New York differential-wise, for being a team that has played 2 fewer matches than the Fusion and 1 fewer match than the Dragons, differential-wise, they are pretty solid, sitting around, top in the league in terms of differential. So they have a benefit, of course, that they put a lot of weaker teams earlier in the season, but for a team that lost 3-1 back in week 3, their differential's pretty good. But the Dragons, for a team that lost 3-0, I mean, their differential's even better. The last 2 matches for Sunday were interesting. Actually, the Battle for Texas was very good, but Mayhem vs. Uprising was awful. The Boston Uprising are bad. Like, there's no sugarcoating it. The Boston Uprising are the worst team in the league. I mean, they're atrocious. They're just bad, and I'm not going to go on this whole thing of harping on this organization and my issues with the organization. But one of the things you have to recognize now is Boston, they can't really do anything, right? Because we're in a state right now where you can't really bring in players to trial them. You know, if you're trying to do online trials to then try to get them at the Boston, like, that could be a disaster. Like, they're pretty much right now at a point where they have 6 players in their roster, and there's nothing they can do about it. We're not going to see a lot of roster moves, I don't think, right now, just based on the status of the world and whatnot. I think we're not going to see a lot of roster moves in general, but especially right now. As things start to clear up, we may see some stuff, but like the Uprising should pursue some new players. Maybe not, release a bunch of players, maybe kind of start to go into Korean contenders and find some good players to throw in with what they have already and try to make a better roster. But it was a bad showing from the Uprising. But the Mayhem looked good. The Mayhem looked not perfect. They struggled a bit. They made mistakes, but Boston was unable to capitalize on those mistakes. And that's the kind of key that you have to have with a team like Florida, right? The difference between Florida and Boston is when Florida made mistakes, they still managed to pull it out because the Uprising didn't capitalize on it. But when the Uprising made mistakes, Florida jumped right on it. And it's just a really rough scene up in Boston. So we'll see what happens long term, but it has not been pretty. Has not been pretty. Final match for Sunday was the Battle of Texas. possibly the best game of the weekend. It was the only 3-2. It was the closest match in score. It was very back and forth. You'd Fuel win a map, Houston win a map, Fuel win a map, Houston win a map, Fuel win a map, series over. But that final control map was really close. Houston kind of threw. Houston kind of also threw on Route 66. I mean, there were a couple times where Houston kind of made a lot of mistakes, made some bad decisions that kind of cost them the series. And that's the kind of thing where you talk about it and you take a look at it in the same exact way that I was just saying with Boston. Boston would make a mistake. Florida would pounce on it. In this case, right, you had teams where, yes, they were both making mistakes and both teams were pouncing on them. But at the end of the day, Houston made more mistakes. They made more critical mistakes. They made more mistakes that cost them big moments, and they lost. Simple as that. And Dallas pulled out the win. Both teams played very well. I actually think this kind of, to me, it actually put a lot of hope for both of these teams. You put the teams in a position where you can say, Dallas and Houston, they are going to be able to compete. They are going to be able to compete for that play-in spot. They're going to be able to compete in these upcoming tournaments that we're going to start seeing starting next month, which I'm going to talk about more later this week. I'll make a video pretty much detailing those entirely. But it's very interesting to see where these teams are kind of going because they're in a very good spot. And I'm excited to see how these teams start to perform now that there's going to be a lot more cross-conference play, or now we're going to see North American teams play against other North American teams just straight up, right? So we can see Defiant versus Gladiators. We can see Shock versus Fusion. We can start to see these matchups start to happen now that we're moving to this tournament format starting at the NMA, but also just in the coming weeks, we're going to start seeing kind of that cross-country play. And hopefully sometime soon, we'll be able to get all the teams in one place again, and we'll be able to have every team playing everybody, right? New York can play again. They can play Atlanta. They can play Titans, because the Titans are now back in North America, which is a whole nother situation that I could make an entire video on probably. There's a lot going on, and I have a lot of time, so you might be getting some more content this week, but no promises. But the Fusion Outlaws match, I thought it was very, very good. I thought the DPS players were exceptional on both sides. I thought Meko and Note were both very, very good. I thought Muma was kind of the main problem area for Houston. I think with Dallas, I don't know what their main problem area was. I thought they played pretty well, but I don't think they were as Closer didn't play as flashy as Jexa did. Jexa did a lot of very good things for his team. That's just kind of him as a player. Closer is much more calm. I thought Repel and Crimzo were both pretty good, but I thought it was a good match. So I'm curious to see how these teams start to do in the coming future against some of these other teams that they haven't played yet. It'll be interesting to see, but I'm intrigued by what's going on. So that's it for the picks from this past week. Let's real quickly take a look at the standings because things are changing. We are seeing some movement in the standings. Let me tell you one thing about these standings. These standings to me are hilarious. These are the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. If you look at the standings, right? London Spitfire are a top 3 team in the Atlantic, and they haven't played since week 5. Not only are they a top 3 team in the Atlantic, they're the number 6 overall seed because they haven't played since week 5, and they have 3 wins and 5 matches played. So they have a very high win percentage, right? 60% is a pretty good win percentage when you have teams like Atlanta where their win percentage is not that high. It's only 57%. So London, who knows what's going on with London? I mean, London honestly is a team that could come out and just be incredible because they have no real info to have people know about. They were looking pretty good at times before everything happened, everything got canceled. Now they're back, or they will be back soon. They're looking, who knows how good. They're going to be an interesting team to watch. They don't return this week. They return, I think, next weekend. So the second weekend of May. The 9th and the 10th, I believe, is when they return. So keep your eye out for them. They'll be an interesting team to watch when they come back. Those are your standings, though. You can see Shanghai Dragons now sitting at the top of the Pacific Conference. Differential-wise, I mean, you really have your top three. Fusion, Dragons, New York are the three best differentials in the league. Arguably your three best teams, but San Francisco Shock right up there with them as well as top four, at least in my opinion. We'll find out what happens long-term with all these teams. There's going to be some really good matches coming up. Obviously, like I said, New York, Shanghai, that's my match for the weekend. Certainly a match to watch. And Echo enters the meta this weekend. So we may see some Echo play. But who knows? That's everything I have for you today, though. If you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing for more content like this in the future. I'm incredibly tired, so I hope it wasn't too much of an issue. But that's it. So thank you once again. You're all staying safe. You're all having doing whatever you can to stay safe and sane through all of this craziness going on in the world right now. I thank you all so much for watching and supporting. I know this time is pretty tough and things are weird and crazy and uncertain, but just do what you can and we'll get through it. But most important thing is to stay inside and avoid large groups. That is number one most important thing you can do. Play video games and you're gonna have a good time. But that's it. So thank you once again, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.